Hi everyone, Kathy Rose here. Let's do something fun and let's look at the chart for the upcoming big conference, the United Astrology Conference, UAC as it's called, happening in early September in Chicago. If you are signed up, if you are registered to attend this conference, or perhaps you're a speaker, it's a fascinating exercise to look at what's going on in your chart and also how the chart of the conference itself interacts with your chart. It helps you to understand your experience at this very large event. So let's dive in and talk about this from all kinds of different approaches. First, I want to say though, I am a humanistic modern astrologer. I'm also one of the speakers at the conference. And what I will present in this video will be the techniques that I use as a modern humanistic astrologer. And perhaps you use other techniques, and that's perfectly fine if you do. Perhaps you're a Hellenistic astrologer and annual profections really play a part, and you want to include that in your analysis of how this conference will affect you, or secondary progressions, or so on. Do it. That's fine. I'm just going to present where I feel I have expertise and let that roll into your analysis so that you include what's right for you. All right, so let's take a look. Let's explore the chart for the event itself. I'll show you the event chart, 7 p.m., September 3rd in Chicago. And we'll just look at the overall signatures for the event. We want to look at how that event chart makes contact to your natal chart. But more importantly, we have to consider the current transits and solar arcs that you are receiving for this year, which shows the developmental wave because that supersedes everything else. And I say transits and solar arcs because those are the two main techniques I use. We're going to look at what I call little bell contact. This is something I specialize in, and that will be contact from the fast moving inner planets at the time of the conference. And I'm also going to have a little section at the end where you include midpoints. They're called indirect arcs, which means if you have a planet moving by solar arc to make exact conjunction to a midpoint, that's going to add nuance to this interpretation. Or if you have a transiting planet making exact aspect to a midpoint, that will also add nuance. It will probably echo and reinforce what the overall signatures have already said, but it's really fascinating and it can help you get ready for this conference. So the first step is understanding the main developmental learning themes currently going on in your life, using whatever techniques work for you, but for this presentation, I'm going to use outer planet transits, solar arcs, prioritizing the simplest, chunkiest aspects with tension, conjunction squares, and oppositions. That's the theory I have, that these three main aspects simplify things and show where the biggest movement forward will be. So I do think it's essential to sit down and say, okay, during this year, where is my focus? What am I learning about? What energies am I receiving? And I want to say at this point, remember, for a lot of student astrologers or newer astrologers, sometimes I think there is a mistake in looking at the event and only looking at where the planets are for that day in relation to your natal chart. So, for example, if you have a Saturn transit going on this year by conjunction square or opposition, transiting Saturn in the wave pattern is operating between 7 degrees Aries and 14 degrees Aries, meaning the lowest degree it hits is 7, the highest degree it hits is 14 in the forward retrograde forward motion. So if you, for example, my moon is 10 degrees Aries, I am receiving a transit from Saturn to my moon this year. When the conference happens, Saturn will not be exactly at 10 degrees Aries. But my Saturn transit to my moon doesn't end until the spring of 27. So just because Saturn isn't exactly on my moon at the time of the conference does not mean that transit isn't alive and active. And of course, I'm going to be attending and speaking at the conference, and the lens of Saturn will be alive and well. I'll be looking through that lens. The same, I have Pluto on my midheaven this year, and it won't be exact because my midheaven is 5 Aquarius, but I will be using and feeling and looking through the lens of Pluto and Saturn when I'm at the conference. And I'm going to go through this in a minute, step by step. But so don't just focus on, is it exact at the time of the conference? Remember, it's a wave pattern that's happening for about a year, and solar arcs last for a year. You may or may not have studied solar arcs yet, but guess what? UAC has a lot of lectures on solar arcs. And the lecture I'm going to be giving, called Happy Cycles, does focus on solar arcs also. Solar arcs have about a year orb time frame, meaning the most important, the most powerful time for the solar arc is when it's exact. But it starts activation 6 months prior to being exact, which is a half a degree orb. And then it stays active for 6 months after. So during that year time frame, that solar arc is alive and well. I'm going to illustrate and show you an example of somebody who's receiving some solar arcs during the conference that aren't exact to the minute, but are still going to be very powerful and alive. So that's part of it. Okay. Understanding the developmental learning theme going on in your life. So let me show you the opening chart for UAC. The grand opening, the opening ceremony begins Thursday, September 3rd, 7 p.m. Now, perhaps you are attending some of the workshops that happen earlier that day, or some of the events that happen the day before that. Perhaps you're going to get there early and get involved in activities prior to this opening chart. And you might say, well, do I look at the chart for when I arrive at the hotel? Do I look at the chart for when I begin that workshop that starts Thursday morning? I would say no. Secondarily, you might look at that, but the main thrust, the main conference statement, personality beginning is going to be this chart that you see on screen. So I would keep your focus there and simplify. What stands out, and I'm just going to do a light touch on this because we'll get back to this chart in a minute, but what stands out for the opening of UAC is a lot of mutable energy, mutable angles. I use Placidus house cusps. That's my preferred method, the quadrant houses, but mutable angles, mutable moon, mutable sun. In fact, of course, my mind goes immediately to that third house with Uranus moon conjunct in Gemini, even though the moon is just past the conjunction. My gosh, I mean, what a signature that is, right? And of course, it's an astrology conference, but our minds, it's going to be a lot of busy brains, a lot of communication, a lot of chatter, a lot of very active mental energy going on. I mean, you would suspect that with a conference of this size, but this is very active. And then the sun is in Virgo with Mercury in Virgo, so that grounds it a little bit, but it's still, we've got the mutability. We've got this flexibility and flow and more playfulness that is offered by all the mutable signs. We've got a suggestion here to not get too attached to things working out exactly the way you think they should work out, because anytime we have mutable energy, it says flow. Just move with the current. It'll all work out. Stay lighthearted. Be ready to pivot. Okay. And Mercury in Virgo is highly analytical, highly intellectual energy. So the main thrust is going to be in our head. We're going to be thinking a lot. I'm very happy to see that Mars is in Cancer for this. And I know, a lot of people will say Mars doesn't function very well in Cancer. However, I like Mars in Cancer for this chart because this suggests remember to give your friends a hug. Remember to connect emotionally. It's the only planet in a water sign in this chart, except for Pisces rising, of course. And the sun moon midpoint is Cancer. So that gives the heart connection, it gives the emotional connection, and it opens the door to some intuition and comfort. Remaining aware of the other attendees and saying, oh, are you cold? Do you need a little bit more room? Can I get you something to help? That's the Mars in Cancer. So I like the fact that that's going to be there. Venus in Libra at the time of the conference. Again, all that does is echo and reinforce what Moon and Uranus and Gemini are saying. Very, very social energy. A lot of need to connect with people, which of course is normal at a conference, but the Venus in Libra adds a little bit of grace and nuance and harmony to this situation. And then the other thing, real quick, is the nodal axis having just moved into Aquarius Leo. So the North Node at 29 Aquarius, which is activating the degree of the solar eclipse in Aquarius that happened in February. So I'll get to this later, but if you have planets in your natal chart in late fixed signs, like I do, then you will notice that the nodal axis is 29 Aquarius, and you may want to go back to asking yourself, what decisions or actions were you taking in February at the time of the solar eclipse in Aquarius? And how are they advancing at the time of the conference? More about that in a moment. So this is just the overall quick energy view of the conference opening chart. Now let's get into some nitty-gritty. So going back to, if the first step you do is to look at the big picture learning developmental theme happening for the year for you. Of course, looking at your transits and solar arcs and understanding what kind of development am I receiving this year. Well, I'm going to break this down for the outer planets to help you just come up with some keywords for how that affects your experience at the conference. So if you are receiving a transit or solar arc from Jupiter, so it could be conjunct, square, or opposite, Jupiter contacting a natal planet in your chart by solar arc or transit, then you are being filled with the energy. You are receiving the energy of expansion and reward. Remember, transits and solar arcs bombard your system with a certain frequency. You're receiving that energy and working with it. The quality of Jupiter is buoyant, it's expansive, it's uplifting, it's excitable, it's generous, it's big. So if you are receiving some strong Jupiter transits or solar arcs, again, they don't have to be exact on the day of the conference, but if they're ongoing for this year for you, then it's going to highlight growth and renewed confidence in your consciousness. It could put you into sort of a lucky, wonderful, serendipitous flow. And it may open opportunities and bigger possibilities for you. So if you're looking through the lens of Jupiter and you're going to this kind of confident or conference, you're going to tend to see what's right and what's good. You're going to tend to be leaning towards enthusiasm and expansion and more extroverted energy. It's a beautiful thing if you're going through Jupiter during this conference. I would say pay attention you don't overdo. Make sure you get enough rest, because Jupiter can sometimes just really go headstrong into it and, neglect self-care. Now let's contrast that to if you are experiencing the frequency of Saturn. So if you're receiving a Saturn transit or solar arc, you are being bombarded with the vibes, with the energy of Saturn. Again, whether it's exact or not during the conference, if it's ongoing, then you are going to be receiving the energy of structure and practical advance. You're going to be looking through the lens of that practical energy, of that structured energy. The quality is more serious. Compare that to Jupiter. It's definitely more serious, more stoic when you're going through a Saturn transit or arc. It's more grounded, it's more structured, it's a little bit more weighty. And so your perspective, what you are trying to get out of that conference, will be very different if you're looking through the lens of Saturn rather than Jupiter. You're going to be probably guided to attend lectures that are more practically based. How can I apply this information? It needs to have a practical application for me. Or maybe you're going to be guided to take lectures about the history of astrology, because that's a very Saturn vibe. And you're probably going to be taking very good notes. You'll probably be very serious about what you are learning from this conference. Whereas Jupiter, maybe you're going to be more oriented to taking some of the lectures that are focused on philosophy. But Saturn would go, nope, needs to be practical. I need to be able to apply it. And you're probably going to be aware of your ambition. How do you want to move astrology forward in your life? Are you moving to be a consulting astrologer? What is it you want to achieve? That's all very Saturn. And so you're going to need to be aware about all this. And the Saturn people will usually show up early. They'll make a plan. They'll look at all the lectures and make a plan to see which ones they want to go to. And then they'll construct a strategy to make sure they're early so they get the seat they want, where Jupiter may just breeze in at the last minute. So it's a very different vibe, right? All right, if you are receiving a transit or solar arc from Uranus as one of the main developmental themes for you this year, and you go to this conference, then you're going to be receiving the very jazzy, electrical, energizing vibes of Uranus. It's the energy of innovation and individuation. The qualities are sudden, spontaneous, electricity, liberating, energizing. Uranus is very much about questioning, the curiosity that comes from Uranus and questioning. So, a Uranus oriented person would be attending lectures and saying, well, let me run this through my own consciousness to see if it fits for me, which is perfectly reasonable, right? But the other thing about if you're going through Uranus cycles and you attend this kind of conference, be very aware that Uranus will give you sudden downloads, sudden go signals, sudden informational blasts that come in that guide you at the last minute to do something you may or may not have been prepared for. So be ready if you are receiving arcs or transits from Uranus that maybe you made a plan about which lecture you're going to attend and you're in the hallway heading to that room, and then maybe you get a message, an intuition, a sudden knowingness to turn left and go into a different door. It's a very common thing with Uranus. Listen and be fluid and flow with that. The other thing I would say about a Uranus cycle is that high level jazzy electricity can sometimes feel like caffeine, and you will need to be mindful that you are grounding yourself. You're going to need to be mindful of relaxing, calming yourself down occasionally because, especially since the conference is happening with Uranus moon in Gemini conjunct. Okay, be mindful of that. Now, very different if you're going through the vibes of Neptune. If you are receiving a Neptune transit or solar arc in your natal chart, as you go to this conference, Neptune, and you can hear how I'm speaking differently because I'm now feeling the vibes of Neptune. It's the energy of flow and inspiration. The qualities are ethereal, otherworldly, very fluid, very soft. Um, Neptune is going to open the doors to intuition, visionary intuition. It's going to be very, very active. And you're going to need to be clear and aware of your energy field so that not only your energy field is cleansed, but so that you have boundaries. Because when you go through Neptune cycles, your sensitivity goes way up. And you're going to be at a conference with 1,500 people and lectures. Let's see, it's 5 different lectures. 15 lectures happening in 5 different segments through the day for 5 days. That's a whole lot of energy. You have to have strong boundaries in your aura so that you're not absorbing the chaos. If you're going through a Neptune cycle during this, intuition's going to play a part of things. And I would highly recommend that you find moments of quiet so that you can regroup, that you monitor your sense of overwhelm, because when Neptune's happening at a conference like this, there could be a moment where you go, I just need to get outside and connect with the sky and breathe some fresh air and have some quiet. And you need to allow yourself to do that. That's very different than if you're going through a Uranus cycle, which is going to incline you to want to have all that electricity and that buzz and that activity, which could end up frying your circuits if you're not careful. Or Jupiter, which is just living large, or Saturn, which is very stoic and much more disciplined. So you see, it affects how we go through the conference and which lectures we are attracted to attend. If you're going through a transit or solar arc from Pluto at the time of the conference, if that's a learning theme, like I'm going through Pluto right now, it's the energy of transformation and empowerment. Now, the qualities of Pluto. The energy of Pluto is intense, it's focused, it's penetrating. If you are receiving the energy from Pluto by arc or by transit, one of the very common things is that it brings up our vulnerabilities. It brings them to the surface. They come forward so that we can look at them, so that we can release them, so that we can develop a new perspective and heal. But the bottom line with Pluto is the goal is empowerment. So if you're going through a Pluto cycle and you're going to this conference, be aware that you're going to be viewing this conference like the eagle on a high branch of a tree. You know, there's going to be this necessary part of you that is bringing about a bigger perspective. You're going to be watching groups and subgroups and interactions and themes. It's very common. And if you have any personal vulnerabilities about, gee, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Is everybody else, more advanced than I am? Oh my God, you're going to be aware of where you have vulnerabilities, and we all have them. Pluto will bring it up, and you need to be able to observe it and help release it. Become a conduit through which empowerment can flow and manifest. That's the point for Pluto. If you're going through Pluto and you attend a conference like this, you will end up with a different level of empowerment, but it could be an interesting journey that you go through. So support yourself, love yourself. All right, now I want to mention if you're receiving solar arcs from some of the inner planets, I'll just do this quickly. And that is assuming you know how to look at your chart for solar arcs. And as I said, if you don't, you can come back to this after you attend the conference, and maybe you've attended some lectures on solar arcs to help you understand this. But if you are receiving a solar arc from the sun, conjunct, square, or opposite to any part of your chart, including an angle, remember, when you receive a solar arc from the sun, you are receiving illuminating light. You are receiving the warm, glowing, golden rays of the sun that is highlighting that particular planet or point in your chart. And it's usually fairly glorious. It's usually fairly auspicious. You want to let yourself be glowing with that light because it can highlight the way for confidence. And the attendees chart I'm going to show you in a minute, she has solar arc sun hitting her midheaven at the time of the conference. And I'll explain that when we get there. If you're receiving a solar arc or transit, not a transit, but a solar arc from the moon, conjunct, square, or opposite anywhere in your chart. This is interesting because in this context, going to a large conference, one of the things a solar arc from the moon can do is connect you to the masses, connect you to trends, connect you to the social patterns people are feeling. You might see patterns on a higher level. It also adds to your emotional awareness. And it's very common if you are receiving a solar arc from the moon that a key female influence may come in. Maybe there's a female speaker that really made a difference in your life, or you met a new female friend at the conference, or that you're very much connected to your own emotional awareness and emotional patterns. If you're receiving a solar arc from Mercury anywhere in your chart, conjunct square opposite, how glorious is that? To go to a conference while you're receiving a solar arc from Mercury? I mean, that is absolutely the hungry mind needing information, wanting to learn. So your brain's going to be very active, and you're going to gobble up information like crazy. It's the perfect fit because when Mercury comes in by arc, quite often people take a trip or they take a class or they expand their mind. So that's perfect. Receiving a solar arc from Venus, conjunct square or opposite anywhere in the chart, is beautiful in a conference situation like this, but it changes the flavor somewhat. And of course, it's not just ever one thing happening in your chart, right? It's layers. Solar arcs and transits are overlapping, and it's usually more than one cycle. But if Venus is part of the mix, then you're receiving the glorious vibes of Venus, which is grace and beauty and social energy and invitations and harmony many, many times. It's something I'm going to be talking about in my lecture on happy cycles. Many times when you receive Venus arcs, you also receive blessings or rewards. Um, so you may notice that wonderful, wonderful invitations happen to you, wonderful social connections. You may notice a profound sense of harmony, um, and you may make a lot of new friends if you're going through a Venus arc. And you want to be open to receiving all of those blessings if you're receiving Venus. Okay, so if you're receiving a solar arc from Mars, then you're receiving the aggressive, well, not aggressive, let's say assertive, um, energetic, dynamic from Mars. Which is actually very good because it can help you stand up for yourself. It can help you have good boundaries. It can help you feel very courageous. And Mars offers motivation. It energizes assertive persuasion. So a solar arc from Mars, you're able to ask for what you want, and you're able to have enough energy to sustain yourself. It's a good thing. Okay, so I don't want you to forget about the nodal axis. This is a key point, especially when you're going to conferences. Check out to see if you have contact to or from the nodal axis by transit or solar arc. So, in other words, I mentioned already the nodal axis at the time of the conference is 29 Aquarius. And if you have planets in late fixed signs, then you're going to be receiving contact by transit from the nodal axis at the time of the conference. Um, but you also need to look at where your nodal axis has moved by solar arc and if it's making contact. And so I'm going to show you some examples of that. But the reason the nodal axis is so important when I'm doing charts for clients and I'm seeing contact to the nodal axis or from the nodal axis, I will commonly ask them, is there an important group meeting coming up for you around this time? That could be anywhere from a conference. It could be a huge presentation they're giving. It could be a family reunion, a class reunion, um, or connections with the public, or incredible public exposure. Now, the speakers will get more public exposure because they're going to be standing in front of the room teaching than the attendees necessarily, but there will be very commonly a lot of nodal connections in attendees and speakers charts when they are at a conference like this. So don't forget this. And it doesn't matter if it's contact to the south node by a conjunction rather than the north node. It's the nodal axis that you want to look at. Group activities, meetings, relationships with the public. I'm going to show you an example of this. Okay. So again, here's the opening of the chart for UAC. What we're going to do now, the attendee who I tutored, who I've been tutoring for a long time. She's taken my courses and she said, let's look at how the chart for UAC affects my chart and how I'm going to experience this conference. She's very excited to go to this conference, and it's her first big one. So she wanted to explore that. So this again is the UAC opening chart. We'll get back to that in a minute. I want to show you the chart of the attendee and illustrate how I apply all these. Now, she gave me permission to use her chart. I'm not going to share her details or her name. Perhaps you might bump into this woman when we're at the conference. The inner wheel is her natal chart. The outer wheel are the solar arcs for her happening at the time of the conference. So all I did was set the solar arcs for September 3rd to see, what's happening. And so you're going to see all these busy lines. Let me go through this. First of all, the top of the chart right here, you can see with my arrow, you see the solar arc sun is hitting her midheaven. Now remember, solar arcs move 5 minutes of a degree per month. So her sun by solar arc at 29 Scorpio, 6 minutes, and her midheaven is 29 Scorpio, 35. It's not exact. You see in the little blue box on the side, the sun equals the midheaven exactly in February of 27. I'm trying to illustrate here, it doesn't matter, it's not exact. It's in operation in September, and it's moving to this beautiful auspicious placement at her midheaven. So I suggested to her, you go to that conference and you let yourself shine, because the sun is going to be shining through your midheaven. Go for it. The nodal axis for the conference, I'll show you this on the next page too, at 29 Aquarius will be square to her midheaven, which is fascinating, activating the same point as the solar arc sun. And look what's happening over here. Solar arc Uranus at 6 Scorpio will be squaring her nodal axis. And I should have drawn the line so both, whoops, south, north, sorry, I advanced it. Let me go back. So that both north and south node were activated, but you can see that with your eye. So she has solar arc Uranus aspecting her nodal axis by square. It doesn't matter if it's square, conjunct, or opposite, it's contacting. So this is perfect for a conference. Oh my gosh. And it's very, very common. If you look at your chart, perhaps you may find a planet by solar arc contacting the nodal axis, or by transit contacting your nodal axis. Start off limiting it to conjunction, square, and opposition, the chunkiest aspects. So here we have solar arc Uranus hitting her nodal axis, and she's going to an astrology conference. Perfect. Perfect. In addition to that, she's got transiting Pluto this year, conjoining her Saturn. Now that's a totally different flavor, right? Pluto on Saturn. Perhaps you just went, oh, poor thing. I don't see it like that, though. I see it as Pluto-Saturn contact, or Saturn-Pluto, either way, is hard work pays off. So certainly the reason she wanted to have me tutor her on the conference experience is she was feeling some of this Pluto energy, wondering, am I really good enough to go to this concert or conference? Do I know enough? Am I smart enough? What if everybody else is farther ahead than me? What if I don't understand some of the things at the conference? Pluto was already doing its job and bringing this stuff up for her to look at. And she looked at it and went, oh, that, of course I should go. And she worked through it. Okay. And that's a very common Pluto thing. But she's going to go with intensity about her ambition to become a professional astrologer. On top of everything else for this attendee, her natal moon is at 2 Gemini. And her natal moon is part of the most powerful aspect structure in her chart. It's part of a T-square with Jupiter in Pisces and Uranus in Virgo. So this activation from transiting Uranus conjoining her moon this year is also triggering Uranus and Jupiter and jiggling her chart with development in the most spectacular way. It's trying to help her release stagnation, and it's working with all the other cycles happening simultaneously. And isn't it interesting? This attendee's moon is the same moon as the conference. So it just seems so perfect that she would be there. Absolutely perfect that she would be there. Um, and on top of this, she has, if you look down here, look at my arrow, she has solar arc Chiron opposite Neptune during the conference. It's not absolutely exact that month. As you see, Chiron is going to be at 11 degrees Taurus 14. Her natal Neptune is 11 Scorpio 35. So that's just 20 minutes of a degree, which is 4 months. So Chiron opposite Neptune will be exact in 4 months. It doesn't matter. It's already in play. It's part of her paradigm. Fascinating about Chiron opposite Neptune, when you see in her natal chart, she's got Neptune Venus conjunct. She is an empath. She's very, very sensitive. She needs moments to regroup. She's wired that way natally. She's very, very sensitive. She needs to cleanse her aura and not pick up on what everybody is projecting. And Chiron opposite her Neptune is going to help her do that. So I look at this and I think her attendance at UAC is going to really help her grow to the next level and feel good about who she is. Um, Everything put together, and we haven't even looked at how the conference chart affects her. But this is looking like there's a whole lot of learning and growth available to her, like it's really meant to be. The next thing I would do is to put your natal chart with the chart of the UAC event on the outer wheel. So in this case, this is the attendee's natal chart on the inner wheel and the UAC event on the outer wheel to look for what I call little bell contact. Little bell contact, something I specialize in, will be receiving contact from the faster moving inner planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, the moon, the sun, and they are activators. And it's very, very common when you travel or when you attend a big event like this that you will have little bell contact. It's very, very common. So let's just go through this real quick for her. As I already mentioned, um, if you look in the outer wheel, that's the UAC event chart, and the nodal axis at 29 Aquarius and Leo will be making a square to her midheaven. Well, that's just perfect. Again, I don't go, oh, it's a square. Maybe that's bad. It's not. It's contact, it's development, it's movement, and it's perfect for attending a large event. But if you also look at over here in the first house, the ascendant of the UAC opening is for Pisces, and the attendee, my student, has Jupiter at 5 Pisces. So isn't that beautiful? At the moment of the opening, the ascendant of the UAC chart is going to be hitting her Jupiter. Nice. That's very, very nice. You see down here in the Gemini area, we've already talked about the fact that this attendee is receiving a transit from Uranus. Remember, in 2026, Uranus is operating between 1 and 5 degrees, and it's going to continue hitting 5 degrees in 27. But so she's ongoing receiving this Uranus transit. It doesn't complete until the springtime. Even though at the time of the conference, Uranus is at 5 degrees, it's still very much active. So it's fascinating that it's going to be triggering her need to learn, her need to communicate. Another thing, this is fascinating. She's going to be receiving transiting Venus, conjunct her own, I'm sorry, transiting Mars, conjunct her own Mars. So at the time of the opening, Mars will be 15 Cancer, and her natal Mars is 17. I like to see it when it's exact, but it's, a little less than 2 degrees difference, not a big deal, because during the conference, Mars will hit her Mars. Um, and that's an alignment, a motivational alignment. She'll be receiving her Mars return. But it wouldn't matter if it was square or opposite. Contact from a little bell, the strongest is always going to be the conjunction, but this is perfect. So she'll be very aware of needing to nurture herself, needing to monitor that Neptune Venus conjunction she has in her natal chart, activated by solar arc um, Chiron, and her sensitivity and all of that. She'll be very aware of all that. Then you also have here on the day of the opening of UAC, the sun will be at 11 degrees Virgo, just 1 degree beyond her natal Pluto. Well, she's going to be flying in the day before because she is a sensitive type and doesn't like to be rushed, doesn't like pressure. So she's going to give herself an extra day. She's going to arrive. She's going to settle into her hotel. That's how she needs to do it to be comfortable. So on the day she arrives, the sun will be on her Pluto. And the theme, I told her the theme is empowerment. Be strong. Let the sun shine on the sun by solar arc on your midheaven. Remember that from the prior slide? And then transit sun on your Pluto. Empower. Just flow into it. This is glorious. She's also going to be receiving transit Venus in Libra, just 5 degrees beyond her natal Mercury over here. It will have hit her natal Mercury a few days before as she is packing, as she's getting ready to travel, as she's getting on the airplane. Venus will be on Mercury. She will be arriving the day before, which puts it a degree closer to her Mercury. And again, she's going to a social event. She's getting ready to connect with people. So the harmony here is very strong, and the power and the focus and what she will get out of this. And it became very meaningful to talk to her about this. Now, one more thing. If you have studied midpoints, um, you may have enough information without having to go to your midpoint sort. But if you want to add this, it adds nuance that is important. So what I have on screen here is the midpoint, 90-degree midpoint sort for the attendee that we've been talking about. Okay. And I've highlighted in the red box some of the midpoints that will be receiving contact by transit or solar arc during UAC. And this adds nuance and flavor to what's going on. An indirect arc is when you have a solar arc planet or angle hitting a midpoint exactly. I call it an indirect transit when you have a transiting planet hitting one of these midpoints. Needs to be almost exact because you don't want to give it much wiggle room. But let me show you. Just let me illustrate how I do this. This attendee has her Moon Saturn midpoint at 3 degrees Aries, 35 minutes. Now, isn't this absolutely fascinating? At the time of the conference, Neptune will be 3 Aries, 35. So she has what's called an indirect transit called transit Neptune equaling Moon Saturn midpoint. The way I would interpret that is to say visionary inspiration and spiritual awareness, which is the Neptune, can be achieved through emotional structure, which is this midpoint of Moon Saturn. And again, that also is saying, because we talked about the fact that she is an empath, she's very sensitive, she feels energy, she has had patterns in the past where she's prone to overwhelm. So I saw this and said, all right, this is telling you how structured and consistent and disciplined you're going to need to be in stabilizing your energy field, maintaining a perspective. Remember, she has transiting Pluto on her Saturn, and Pluto's often about perspective. The perspective that it's not your job to make everyone happy, it's not your job to fix their life, and it's not your job to absorb their energy. And transiting Neptune equals Moon Saturn is saying this exact same thing. I mean, it is besides all the astrological information she will learn at this conference, she's going to learn this too. Interesting, right? The attendees Mercury Venus midpoint is at 0 Scorpio 32. In the UAC chart, Chiron will be at 0 Taurus 26. So she's going to be receiving transiting Chiron, activating her Mercury Venus midpoint. Doesn't matter, it's an opposition, it's equal, it's activation. Okay. Now, fascinatingly enough, remember, she's going to also be receiving solar arc Chiron opposite her Neptune. So she's going to be receiving the vibes of Chiron in two different ways, activating her Neptune by solar arc and transiting Chiron, activating her Mercury Venus. So the way I would interpret that is to say, transiting Chiron, a current emphasis on healing can be achieved through Mercury Venus, learning and social connections. So her interaction with all the people at the conference will tell her a lot about where she needs to heal. And it's going to be really interesting. And it wouldn't surprise me if she attends a lot of lectures on healing in some way. She also is going to have her Sun Jupiter midpoint, which is at 15 Sagittarius 27. And the UAC chart is going to have the UAC midheaven is 16 Sagittarius 38. So 1 degree difference, but there are enough echoes. Remember, the attendee was going to have, and I don't think I talked about it, but she will be experiencing solar arc Jupiter squaring her ascendant while she's at the conference. So she'll be receiving those Jupiter vibes in that way. And I think it's very, I think we can easily say transiting midheaven, the UAC transiting midheaven, equaling her Sun Jupiter midpoint, even though it's 1 degree difference, is relevant. And I would interpret that career pursuits and public image growth, which is the midheaven, can be activated through enthusiastic expansion using higher education, Sun Jupiter. So, and again, remember, she has solar arc Sun on her midheaven. So these two transiting midheaven equals Sun Jupiter and solar arc Sun on her midheaven. Can you see how they're saying the same thing? I said, go there and shine. Go there and integrate your confidence. You know, be empowered. Know that you are talented in astrology, and she really is. She hasn't studied it for very long, but she's really good. And integrate that. And all these midpoints and all these cycles say that that conference is going to help her do that. So we've covered a lot. And if I were to do a review now, I would say to remember the outer planet transits and solar arcs contacting your natal chart show you the deeper themes that are happening now, the developmental themes happening in your life that are certainly going to be in play at the conference. Remember, that's first and foremost most important. Then secondarily, the contact from the UAC opening chart to your natal chart reveals the immediate impact from the conference. And then the contact to your natal midpoints from transiting planets or from arcing planets will add nuance. And it helps you to understand. I mean, this conference takes a big commitment. It's expensive. I mean, it's a big financial commitment for sure. And you're taking time off work. Maybe you're taking vacation time. And it's just a profound jazzy experience being around 1,500 people with lectures going on all day and information flying constantly. So checking your chart in this way just helps you understand the strategy or the focus or the lens through which you are operating in life right now while you are at this conference. It's interesting. So thank you for listening. I just wanted to share this to get you thinking about it, and I hope you will take some time prior to the conference to apply this. And I hope it helps you. And I look forward to seeing you there. Bye for now.